Something critical has just been confirmed, and it directly involves a witness detail many people dismissed early on. The RCMP didn't announce an arrest. They didn't name a suspect. But they did confirm two new details that change how investigators are reconstructing the disappearance of Lily and Jack. And one of them involves what a witness heard. Not saw, but heard, at a moment that now matters far more than before. Stay with me. Because once these pieces are laid out in order, it becomes clear why this case is still very much active and why investigators believe the timeline may be tighter than anyone realized. Let's slow this down and fully ground what investigators were facing before any new details emerged. Lily and Jack vanished from a quiet, rural community in Nova Scotia, an area defined by long stretches of wooded land, scattered homes, and limited foot traffic. Their disappearance immediately triggered concern not just locally, but across the province, because of how unusual the circumstances were. Two young children don't simply disappear without someone noticing something. And from the very beginning, RCMP treated this as a high-priority missing persons case. The response was massive. RCMP coordinated one of the largest search operations Nova Scotia has seen in years. Officers, search and rescue teams, trained dog, helicopters, and volunteers were deployed. Dense wood were combed. Bodies of water were searched. Roads, ditches, trails, and nearby properties were examined in detail. This wasn't a brief sweep. It was a sustained, methodical effort designed to rule out as many possibilities as possible. At the same time, investigators were working off the ground. Dozens of people were interviewed, including family members, neighbors, and anyone who may have crossed paths with the area around the time Lily and Jack were last seen. RCMP also collected and reviewed hundreds of tips from the public. Every call, message, and report was logged, assessed, and cross-checked. Just as important and often overlooked was the digital side of the investigation. RCMP confirmed they reviewed hours upon hours of video footage. That includes residential cameras, business cameras, traffic cameras, and any available surveillance that could help reconstruct movements, timelines, and gaps. This process alone can take months, because investigators are not just watching video. They're syncing timestamps, comparing angles, and matching footage to witness statements. For a long time, RCMP maintained a careful public stance. They repeatedly stated there was no evidence of a crime. But equally important, they never confirmed what actually happened. No explanation. No clear scenario. Just unanswered questions. That silence matters. Because when physical evidence is limited, when there's no confirmed crime scene, no clear trail, and no definitive forensic answer, investigations often shift their weight. They lean more heavily on what people heard, what they saw, when something happened, which direction someone moved, which sounds didn't belong. That's when witnesses stop being secondary and quietly become central. And that brings us to the first newly confirmed detail RCMP has acknowledged, a detail rooted not in objects or locations, but in timing, observation, and human reporting. RCMP has now confirmed that witness statements describing unusual sounds, including the presence of vehicle, were formally logged into the investigative timeline and treated as actionable data, not dismissed as background noise or coincidence. That distinction matters more than it might sound. Multiple witnesses independently reported hearing a vehicle during a very narrow overnight window, before Lily and Jack's disappearance was discovered the following day. These weren't vague recollections made weeks later. These were time-specific observations tied to a quiet rural area where unexpected sounds stand out. In communities like this, people notice when something doesn't fit the normal rhythm of the night. What's new is not the existence of those reports. Those statements were known early on. What has now been confirmed is how RCMP is treating them. Investigators have acknowledged that these audio-based witness accounts are being actively time-matched against digital evidence. That includes nearby surveillance cameras, traffic cameras, and any available footage capable of showing vehicle movement during that specific window. It also includes cross-referencing phone data, movement patterns, and previously collected timelines from other witnesses. This is a critical escalation in analytical focus. Rather than treating the sound of a vehicle as an isolated detail, something that could be coincidence, misinterpretation, or unrelated, RCMP is now testing whether that sound corresponds to a real, traceable movement through the area. In other words, they're asking a very specific question. Did something physically move through that space at the same time witnesses say they heard it? That's a different investigative posture. When police begin synchronizing witness sound reports with digital timestamps, it signals that the information has passed an internal credibility threshold. It means investigators believe the timing may matter. It means they believe the sound could align with an event, not just background activity. It also suggests something else quietly but significantly. This approach is often used when physical evidence is minimal, but timelines are tight, when minutes matter, when knowing whether something happened at 1:12 a.m. instead of 2:05 a.m. can change how an entire case is understood. By integrating witness accounts into the core timeline and testing them against objective data, RCMP is no longer asking whether the witnesses were mistaken. They're asking whether the data confirms them. And that marks a shift from passive documentation to active verification in how this disappearance is being examined. RCMP has also clarified something that may sound subtle on the surface, but is actually critical to understanding how this investigation is moving forward. They have not confirmed physical evidence of a vehicle, no tire impressions publicly acknowledged, no recovered vehicle, no confirmed camera image released. But just as importantly, they have not ruled out movement through the area during that overnight period either. And that balance in language is intentional. What this tells us is how the witness information is being used. The audio-based reports are not being treated as proof of what happened. Investigators are not presenting them as confirmation that a vehicle was involved, nor are they framing them as evidence of a specific action. Instead, the witness detail is being used as a temporal tool, a way to narrow the window in which something could have occurred. That distinction matters. In complex missing person cases, especially ones involving young children and rural environments, investigators often begin by trying to answer one core question. When did the situation change? Not how, not why, when. By treating the witness account as a marker rather than conclusion, RCMP is defining boundaries. If multiple people heard something unusual within the same narrow overnight window, that window becomes an anchor point. Everything before it and everything after it gets reevaluated in relation to that time frame. This allows investigators to refine which video footage matters most, which digital records are relevant, and which tips move from general information to priority review. It also helps determine which reported sightings, sounds, or movements can be excluded because they fall outside that defined period. Equally important is what RCMP is not doing. They are not dismissing the witness account due to lack of physical corroboration. They are also not elevating it beyond what the evidence can support. That careful positioning suggests an evidence-led approach, where witness input shapes the structure of the investigation without prematurely locking investigators into a single theory. In other words, the witness reports help narrow the investigative clock, not write the ending. And once investigators narrow a window, the next step is to ask what else intersects with it. Digital signals, movement patterns, or overlooked details that suddenly align in time. That process leads directly to the second newly confirmed RCMP detail, one that builds on timing rather than sound, and further tightens the focus of this case. RCMP has confirmed that older witness statements in the Lily and Jack Sullivan investigation are being actively reviewed. Not boxed away, not archived, and not treated as closed chapters of the case. That clarification carries far more weight than it appears to at first glance. In long-running investigations, especially ones without a confirmed crime scene or definitive physical evidence, witness statements are often the first pieces of information collected, and the easiest to misinterpret early on. A sound, a movement, a fleeting observation may seem insignificant when it's standing alone, but investigators understand something critical. Context changes over time. RCMP has acknowledged that as new digital data, analysis, or recovered items surface later in an investigation, earlier witness information is often revisited with fresh perspective. This isn't about second-guessing witnesses. It's about asking smarter questions than were possible at the start. Questions like, did someone report hearing something at the same time a digital signal now shows movement? Did a detail that seemed ordinary suddenly become relevant once a timeline narrowed? Did a statement that couldn't be verified early on now align with newly analyzed footage or device data? This is a standard but highly intentional investigative practice. It reflects an understanding that information matures. A witness detail doesn't need to be immediately useful to be valuable. Sometimes its significance only becomes clear once other pieces fall into place. RCMP's acknowledgement of this process tells us the case is not static. Investigators are not simply waiting for new tips to arrive. They are actively cycling information back through the system, testing it against updated timelines, refined windows, and evolving datasets. That's why describing this investigation as stalled would be inaccurate. What we're seeing instead is an information-heavy case, one built on layers of human observation, digital records, and cross-reference timelines rather than a single dramatic piece of evidence. These cases often move quietly, internally, and methodically. Most importantly, this confirms something many had questioned. Witnesses are not peripheral to this investigation. They remain central. Their observations, even the ones made early on, are still shaping how investigators understand time, movement, and possibility in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. So, let's be clear about what RCMP has, and has not, said. They have not named suspects. They have not confirmed a crime. They have not closed this case. But they're confirmed. Witness audio details are part of the active timeline, and witness information is still being re-examined alongside digital evidence. That means investigators believe the answer may lie in alignment, not discovery. One sound, one time window, one detail finally lining up. And that's why this case is far from over.